Okay, it's my rig rundown. Guitar I'm using mostly is this 58 Les Paul reissue, and that's going into a 65 amps super low. So everything's switched off now except the compressor. So this is my clean sound. The amp can get really dirty as well, but I tend to use the pedals for dirt at the moment. So diamond compressor, which is off the board there, everything pretty much nooned. That's the first pedal in the chain. Then I go to my pitch shifter, which at the moment is Pitchfork. I really love it because it's just got so many options. You can use the perfect fourths and fifths and get horror movie kind of sounds, as well as doing your basic octave up and downs. Sometimes switch that out with a POG 2, which is kind of a bit more of an ambient pitch shifter because it's got that attack and low pass filter capability, but still awesome pitch shifter, really affordable. Goes into the Dunlop after that. Not the best volume pedal I've ever had, but definitely the most reliable. I've broken just too many Ernie balls, so I've given up on them. Now, dirt at the moment is mainly the small sound, big sound fuck overdrive. So for those of you that don't know, it's kind of a ratty sort of a sound, like it's real loose, but it can get quite tight as well. This is a fairly high gain setting. Just works really well with what I'm doing at the moment. If I need a sort of a smoother, fuzzier sound, I'll probably swap it out for this. So this, for those of you that don't know it, it's kind of like a Civil War big muff, but you can see it's got some extra controls there on the top, so you can dial in the mids and whatever, and you know, you can just get some really smooth, awesome fuzz sounds out of it. El Capistan next. So the whole point of this board, I think, is that I've got really at least, let's say, 4 pedals on there, 5 pedals if you count the count, but 5 that can loop. So I can set loops up running through different combinations of effects at different stages. So the El Capistan is the first one, and of course it's also got the ability to just be an awesome looper. So that can just be, maybe if I've got a whole bunch of atmospheres and whatever looping further down the chain, I can just run the overdrive into the El Capistan as a delay rather than a looper, and just get a really nice lead sound that way. That leads then into the procession. Now the reason I have the reverb so early in the chain is I use it more as a lead sound, 100% wet, so either to get a drone or to buff up pedals like the Gravitas, which I'll show you next. Procession is a really cool kind of sci-fi reverb, and I use all 3 of the sounds on it, to be honest. It's got a flanger, a tremolo and a filter. Okay, Gravitas next. So that's a new pedal for me. I had a warped vinyl, which I just couldn't bond with it at all. So I got the Gravitas last week, sold the warped vinyl, got the Gravitas, loving it. I think I'm finally understanding the dip switches and the Chase Bliss sort of philosophy. It's just a beautiful, just by itself, it's just such a nice sounding tremolo. And then when you combine it with this, you can get some really cool Mogwai kind of atmospheric sort of stuff going on. So loving that pedal, considering getting a faves for it once I've mucked around with it enough to see if it needs that many presets. Count to 5 is the next pedal, so I use that in all 3 modes. In the first mode, it just adds that shimmery, chirpy bird noise thing that, you know, it's so famous for, and I mean that's great. You even just, if you sort of get subtle with it, you can just accent a really nice chord progression, you know. It doesn't have to be crazy, you know, but then you can also just use it as a really cool looper. So like, if you put it in mode 2 and maximize the randomness, and you know, just record any old thing. Now you've got a really nice loop that you can do whatever you like across the top of. stuff after it, and really, you know, mess around with the loop that way. It's just a really versatile pedal, and mode 3 is the same. You can get really cool triple loops happening. And if I wanted to loop something on the other side of it, I would probably use the El Capistan to loop something over the top of it rather than loop itself. Okay, that heads then into the Dark Star, which is probably one of my all-time favorite ambient reverbs. It's just a nutso pedal, and again, that one's usually at full wet, so I can do, you know, like kind of loops, drones, sorry, which I can loop. You know, you can also put it in pitch mode and get really cool cello type deep echoing sounds. And you can also use it like way more subtly as well. So you can just sort of have it as a without the 100% mix. It's just a subtle underneath what you're playing. Sort of stuff. So just awesome pedal. Where's that go? Then it goes into the Nemesis. So the Nemesis is my all-rounder delay, and I think I underappreciated it for a while. But when I took some of the other delays off my board, I sort of I rely on it now, and I've just come to realise what a fantastic delay it is. It does a lot of different things, and it does them well. I will sometimes swap it out with this. The Dig, because the Dig obviously doesn't do near as much stuff as the Nemesis, but the one thing it does do, it does like no other delay pedal. It's brilliant, it just does this fantastic 80s rack kind of sounding ambient wash. Anyway, so out of the Nemesis, then that's when I start going stereo into the X4 looper, and I've got that set up. Well, I changed the way I've got it set up depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll use the decay knob to get some sort of Frippertronics leads happening on one loop while there's some atmospheres happening in another. But generally speaking, probably the most important thing with the dip switches here is you set it up so that one click starts your loop and the second click stops your loop but goes straight into overdrive. That way, if you're recording with effects, the tails of the effects get recorded over the beginning of the loop. That way you don't get that horrible cut-off sound. It's just much more versatile that way. So that's my first, I guess, proper looper in the chain. That's going again in stereo into the triple delay. I'm not really using that as a delay. So what I'm using it is as a sort of a faux ambient looper, and there's a couple of YouTube videos sort of demonstrating that, how that works. But essentially you set it up in series and you make sure that the last delay in the chain has endless repeats. So if you set up something any sort of chord change like that, arpeggio, and then you can switch it off and that'll just loop, and you can do other stuff over the top of it. So I can set up then a loop using the Ditto or the El Capistan or some sort of an atmosphere here if they were in key. Mess around with them so they are, or play live over the top of it, and it just gives you this nice evolving kind of devolving kind of a loop. That goes into the Big Sky, which is my main atmospheric reverb, and then right at the end of the chain is my last looper, and that's the Electro-Harmonix 22500. Now the reason that one is at the end of the chain and the Ditto is a lot closer to the beginning is because the Ditto is just much easier to do things like erase loops, change modes on. It's all pretty much at your fingertips, whereas the 22500 is a brilliant looper, but you've got to do a little bit of, I guess, menu diving, and however much I use it, I just can't get used to it. I'm constantly going back to the manual. There's something about it. Having said that, it's got 99 sets of 2 loops, and each one has a independent reverse or octave on it, so it is a brilliant looper, and I've never even used the rhythms or the MIDI that came with it. I got that one fairly cheap, so it's a brilliant part of my kit. So what do I do with all this stuff? Just to give you an example, I might get an atmosphere happening, a really simple atmosphere happening on that one. pretty much it. Apologise for all the noise. As you can see, I'm using a lot of crappy cables at the moment while I finalise my setup. And so there's a lot of hum and buzz, but that's how I've got it set up. So I try and keep it like as versatile as possible so I can loop at any different stage. And then there's, you know, the odd pedal that I'll swap out. It's pretty much finished. The one pedal that I'm missing is probably the same pedal that a lot of people are waiting for, which is the Particle version 2, which will go somewhere around here. And that's my setup. Thanks for watching.